All right. Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Is this working? Cool. Well, it is good to be with y'all this morning. Most of y'all are strange faces to me, and I'm sure I'm a strange face to you. My name's Caleb Odell, and I was asked to cover for y'all's preacher today. And so I'm from SIBI. I'm in school there currently. We just started. I'm in my first year, in my first month. And so I'm excited to be with y'all and get to do this for you. I'm very honored to be here. So today we're going to start our study off in James chapter 1. I wasn't sure exactly where y'all had been, but they told me to do anything. So I've been learning about James in classes and thought it'd be a good one to do. So we're going to start in verse 12 in James chapter 1. In the general idea, we're going to try to make it through verse 27 if we can. We'll see how far we get. But the main idea of this section that James is kind of portraying to those that he's writing to, I would say, is the idea of a blessed person. What do they look like? And so before we read that, I kind of want to see what you guys think. What does a blessed person look like in your mind? What are some examples? Yeah, someone who has peace. That's good. Joy. Those are blessings. What other attributes or things are blessings or that a blessed person has? Yeah, faith. Mm-hmm. Different outlook on the world, yeah. Yeah, a good, strong family, a spiritual family, yes, that's good.
The world sees as a whole, and if you're blessed, if you have nice cars, nice house, nice clothes, but that's not what we need to focus on, but that's how the world
Mm-hmm.
sees
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. The world often sees a little bit differently. James will talk about throughout his book how wealth is not really a blessing. It's something we have. It's not bad, but it's not necessarily, when he's talking about being blessed, that's not his idea. So yeah, that's a good point. Any other thoughts? Yeah, our relationship with God is a great blessing. Cool. That's a good list. That is some good examples of a blessed person. So kind of keep those in mind as we're reading through this. So I'll read the section of verses for us, and then we'll start to kind of break it down into even smaller, little parsed out sections, and we'll have some questions on that. So James chapter 1, verses 12 through 27. Blessed is the person who endures testing, because when he is approved, he will receive the crown of life that he has promised to those who love him. No one who is being tempted should say, I'm being tempted by God. For God cannot be tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one. But each one is tempted when he is dragged away and enticed by his own desire. Then desire, after it is conceived, gives birth to sin. And sin, when it is brought to completion, gives birth to death. Do not be deceived, my dear brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of change. By his will, he gave birth to us through the message of truth, so that we should be a kind of firstfruits of his creatures. Understand this, my dear brothers. Every person must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For human anger does not accomplish the righteousness of God. Therefore, putting aside all moral uncleanliness and wicked excess, welcome with humility the implanted message which is able to save your souls. But be doers of the message and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Because if anyone is a hearer of the message and not a doer. This one is like someone staring at his own face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and immediately forgets what sort of person he was. But the one who looks into the perfect law of liberty and continues to do it, not being a forgetful hearer, but a doer who acts, this one will be blessed in what he does. If anyone thinks he is religious, although he does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of our God and Father is this, to look after orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. So there's the first half of this chapter. James has just gone on to exhort them to have joy in their trials, because they're a blessing to us. The world does not think of trials as a blessing, but James calls them that. In fact, he starts off this verse with this idea: blessed is the person who endures testing, because when he is approved, he will receive the crown of life he has promised to those who love him. So trials are a blessing because of what it produces in us. So what are some trials that we face here today in Texas? Submission, surrendering, yeah. Yeah. Rain not coming at the right time. Yeah.
I guess one of the more difficult trials for me has always been being willing to accept help. Admitting that I can't do it alone, but I need someone to help me. I'm pretty independent, think I can do it myself. And I gotta be rock bottom before I'll ask for help.
Mm.
It's always been a difficult trial for me.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to ask for help. Death of a loved one. That's a hard trial too, yeah. Loss of a job. Yeah. Sick children. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of trials that we face. So what are positive things that come from these? It's kind of hard to see them as positive, but growth. Growth in what ways?
Stronger faith, to trust others,
Mhm.
the comfort you get from your family and your friends,
Yeah,
the comfort you difficult times.
yeah. Closer community, stronger faith, closer relationship with God. Yeah, those are good. Mm-hmm.
Allowing God to work the situation and not me,
Yeah.
my time, and letting God guide through the trial and the tribulation.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we may not see the end of the tunnel just yet, but it's there for a reason.
Yeah. It grows us in our reliance on God. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We get wisdom from it. Yeah.
I would say that wisdom, trials that you might go through, and once you get through it, God might put you in someone else's way going through the same thing you went through, so that you can bless them.
Yeah. So that we can help others. Preparing us for the next stage that God has for us in our walk with Him. His plan for us. Yeah. Good. We grow in obedience. Yeah. For sure. So sometimes it's hard for us to see them as positive, but we've started to see how they are positive and how these things are blessings, as James calls them. So if trials are a positive thing in a way, What are positive ways we can respond to these trials?
Look for the lesson in the trial, which is really hard when you're in the trial, but God is always trying to teach you something.
Seeing the purpose, seeing the good things, not getting caught up in how bad the trial is.
Well, the world's gonna see someone suffering, but as a Christian, even though we're suffering, we find joy and we praise God for, we praise God for our suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And the world sees that, doesn't understand that, that's a lot of times how the world, we get the world's attention is through our suffering,
Mm-hmm.
because we don't react the way the world does.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing is, like somebody here, this congregation is very, a lot of people gather around and help, whether it's money wise or somebody died or, you know, they just need help. People come together, they pray, they're holding their hands.
Mm-hmm.
It does make you feel better. I don't know how, but it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Joining together in community is a good way, a positive way to respond to a trial, yeah. Anyone else? All right, yeah, there's some good ways that we can respond to trials. And as we talked about, kind of leaning into that relationship with God. Increase your time in prayer. Increase your time in His Word. These really kind of help concrete you, like firm up your foundation going through the storm. Leaning on Him and leaning on others. Those are good ways. I also want to notice that James says that like we will have trials. This is an expectation, not an if, but a when. So he's telling them, don't be surprised by going through a trial, going through a hard time. Understand that this will happen, but it is a good thing. It is a blessing, and respond positively to it. One last question on this. What sometimes prevents us from responding positively to trials? Wrong focus, negative attitudes, yeah. Pride. Sometimes we think we got it on our own. Lack of faith. Yeah. Yeah, judgmental. Selfishness. Yeah. Anyone else? Good. That's some good lists of things that prevent us from doing this. So our encouragement from James here is make sure we have a good perspective. Make sure we lean into trials and what they produce in us. See them from a good light and respond positively to them. So kind of now transitioning into this next section, he's going to talk about temptations. So let's read that again. Verses 13 through 15 kind of cover this idea. No one who is being tempted should say, I am being tempted by God, for God cannot be tempted by evil, and He Himself tempts no one. But each one is tempted when he is dragged away and enticed by his own desires. Then desire, after it has conceived, gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is brought to completion, gives birth to death. So what are temptations that we face today? What was? Greed, finances. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, anything relating to money, financial security, wanting things that we shouldn't, riches. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Taking more than what you're owed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any others? Mm. Recognition, wanting, desiring recognition. These are some good examples of temptations. And there's a lot of temptations that we face. Where does James tell us that temptations come from? Our desires. Yeah. It's not God's fault. It's not the devil's fault. It's our desires. And we make a choice. James draws that out here. And I think that's an important point to notice. Now, the devil will use our desires, and sometimes he does tempt us, but they come from our desires, and we choose. We have power in this situation. And God does not tempt us. God will test us. And testings or trials, those can be given to us by God, but God never tempts us. And we see this in the story of Abraham. God tests him with Isaac. Other scriptures will tell us this. And James is pointing that out here because some will blame it on God. They'll be like, well, he didn't prevent us from being tempted. Or God didn't deliver me from my sin. Well, James is saying it's your desires and your choices. He's putting the onus on us. There's no way to wiggle out of this with James. He's pointing out very clearly where the source comes from and where the choice comes from. So we have to be careful with these. What are some useful things that we can do to help us resist temptations? Prayer. Yeah, that's a good one. Being in the Word. Yeah. Yeah, community. Community is real important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, leaning on the power of God and not on our own. That's good. When you said surrounding yourselves like-minded people, I want to expound on that a little bit more. Sometimes that looks like worship on Sundays or Wednesdays. That's sometimes coming into that community helps us resist temptations. Sometimes that's having someone we can call, a friend who, whenever we're being tempted, we can call up and say, hey, I'm struggling. And they'll pray with you, or they'll come visit you. They'll help you walk through that. Someone who will counsel you in the midst of your temptation. Someone who can look into your life and lovingly say, this is not the standard you're being called to by God. This is the standard. Live up to it. So accountability partners, friends, family. So all throughout the week surrounding ourselves and having people who are like-minded, who know the standard and who can call us to it, who we can trust. So the community is a very important aspect because sometimes we'll read his word and we won't absorb it. We won't do it. James makes that claims. The blessed person does what the word says. But people often tend to hear it, tend to read it, and they don't do it. And sometimes our community can help us recognize that and push us to do it. So community is very, very important. And prayer. Prayer is the way we tap into God, tap into his spirit, align our perspectives with him. We look at our temptations and we say, God, we agree this is evil, and help us walk through it. And he does. He wants you to succeed through the temptation. He doesn't want you to fall. Also know the different verbiage of James with temptation. Testing is to be endured. Temptation is to be overcome, to be conquered. We can't change a test. We can't change a trial. we can only endure it. Temptation, we can. We don't have to endure a temptation. We have to overcome a temptation. This is a battle. It's a war. And James will describe this later on, as well as many other places. First John will talk about this, how you overcome the devil, the evil one. So again, thing. This is something we conquer. So I wanted to point that out. It's a cool way that James starts to describe this. So what things hinder us from resisting temptations? What are things that we do that put us in a position where we're weak against temptations? Yeah, we toe the line. We go to. Yeah. Go in place where the temptation is present, whatever it may be. Yeah.
We justify it sometimes.
Yeah. Justification. We like to make ourselves feel good. We don't like to be like, well, this is not good. I'm failing here. That's kind of hard to recognize. It takes humility. Our pride gets in the way a lot. Yeah. Anger. Yeah. Sometimes we can be angry and we're like, yeah, that's. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we often find good ways to make excuses, to be able to allow ourselves to make whatever sin acceptable. Other things? Yeah.
It's really easy to be a Christian when you're inside these walls, but when you get to work or to school or wherever else you may be,
Mm-hmm.
family in some cases,
Yeah.
could bring you down rather than you lifting them up if you're not strong enough.
Mm-hmm. Being around people a lot and allowing them to influence us who don't uphold the standard, make up excuses, or even outright ignore it. Some good examples.
Well, that goes back to the prison. That is why I took a month off.
Mm-hmm.
Health reasons, but working in the prison system is just a lot. It's a different environment, and I became really bitter and angry.
Mm-hmm.
And I am slowly starting to find myself again.
Mm.
But I agree with that.
Yeah.
Because your job and your surroundings to have a lot to do
Mm-hmm.
with privilege.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, that's a really good example. And this goes to both questions. Sometimes our job hinders us. And sometimes that means we need to change jobs or change the locations, change what we're doing. Sometimes that's just taking a break. But if anything, you resisting temptations, you cut it out. That's the call of Jesus in Matthew chapter 5 through 7. Anything, you cut it out. If you have a job that's pulling you away, and you need more than a break, and you need to quit, but you're like, well, what about my finances? Well, God is faithful. That's not to say to be responsible, but you don't keep anything in your life from God, whether that be money or your worries, whatever it may be. They should never stand in the way. You cut it all out. And so that's a good example. Is there anybody else? Any other thoughts? All right. Verses 16 through 18. I love this section. It's a very positive section. James says this: "Do not be deceived, my dear brothers. Every good gift, every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow of change. By his will, he gave birth to us through the message of truth, so that we should be a kind of first fruits of his creature." James just really highlights the goodness of God and how he always gives us good things. God is a good God. He's our Father, and there's no variation, and there is no darkness. There's no gray areas. There's no shadows within him. It's a really great reassurance from James here in light of everything. And he gave birth to us. He has made us the first fruits of his creatures. This is really cool imagery, really cool words that James has written for us, really good encouragement. So I want us to reflect on what blessings has God given us this week, this past week. What blessings has God given you in your life? Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. Yeah, the rain is a good blessing, and sometimes it's unfortunate for the cotton farmers, but it's still a good thing. But yeah. Yeah, getting together here today. Mhm. Yeah. There's some good blessings this week. Who else? What blessings have you had this week? Yeah. Every day we wake up, life. It's a gift. Yes. Mm. That's awesome. Yeah. It's good to have loved ones back, especially from an area that may be dangerous.
I think a lot of times we might forget scenarios or situations that we were in the past and realize how simple things and so many cliche things are even as a blessing. At one point in time in my life, I didn't know where my next meal was coming from for me and my boys, and
Mm.
I don't have to worry about that today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Food, being able to, sorry. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This week, sometimes God has answered my prayers, sometimes he didn't. It's both a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't need what I was asking for.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when we're struggling like this week, he gives us, he puts somebody in our plate, in our way that needs our help. He allows us to help someone else in need.
Mm-hmm.
To realize just how much we have just by helping someone else.
Mm-hmm.
We can see our blessings and we're able to share those blessings with someone else.
Yeah. Putting people in our lives who need help. Yeah, that's a good blessing. Anyone else have a blessing? Yeah, to be able to have a relationship with him. Yeah. Prayer, singing. Yeah. His word, good blessings.
I thank God every day, every morning when I wake up. Thank you, Father, for letting me wake up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Every morning's a blessing.
But there are no coincidences. And so if we're looking for God in our lives, we can see him working. And that's always a blessing, to be able to, in those trials that we're talking about, and even in our temptations,
Mm-hmm.
God's working. He's
Yeah.
If we're looking for, we can sing working, but
Hmm.
get us through those trials and tribulations.
Yeah. Yeah. The work of God is a very great blessing. Um, because there is people who choose not to have God. There's passages that talk about how God's discipline, he disciplines his children. When you aren't being disciplined by God, that's not a place you want to be. And so sometimes these disciplinary actions of God, or the trials or the hard things, whatever he puts us through, they're disciplined and they're good. Um, and, uh, and this is a good analogy for that. I just love this idea. Like God, there's so many passages that talks about God being a good father who disciplines his children. Whenever some people will think a little bit differently about God's judgments or his disciplinary actions. For example, when someone's caught in sin, whatever it is, when they're caught, that's an act of discipline. That is a gift, the act of being caught. That's not the judgment, whatever may come from that. That's allowed to be able to stay in the sin, allowing it to be hidden. That's judgment. That's non-discipline from God. He's allowing you to choose sin and death. And that's not a place we ever want to be. Meeting the standard. Come live in life. Don't live in death. And so I think it's really important for us to have that perspective. Because sometimes we'll look at God and we'll be like, why are you letting this happen to me? You're putting me through an uncomfortable, like challenging situation. And God's like, this is for your good. This is so that you may have life and not have death. So it's really important that we understand that. And I think James is really trying to get that point across to us through his message here. And I would encourage you to read the whole book of James. It's not long. And you will see this theme throughout the entire book. So yeah, I think that's a really good one to have, a really good perspective, very good blessing. So now kind of moving on, that was a lot about struggles and being blessed in the struggling, whether that's in enduring the trials or overcoming temptations. Good blessings come from God. Now there's a kind of a new section that he's going to start in these next coming verses, and that's blessed in doing things. Things we do produce blessing. And some people will take James wrong, and I don't want this to be construed. James is not saying that when you do something, you're saved. We don't do things to be saved. We are saved, therefore we do things. That's what James will claim, and so do the other New Testament writers. Some things we do will produce a blessing. A blessing is not salvation. Salvation is a blessing, but it is not the blessing James is talking about. So I want to make sure we understand that as he talks about certain things you're going to do will bless you and will bless others, just to have a right perspective on that. So what we do matters, and James is highlighting that. What you do really matters, but he's not talking about salvation. You don't earn your salvation. So anyways, that's a point I wanted to make before we started in. So verses 19 through 21, he'll say, it's kind of the idea of blessed in living God's way. So he'll say this, understand this, my dear brothers, every person must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. For human anger does not accomplish the righteousness of God. Therefore, putting aside all moral uncleanliness and wicked excess, welcome with humility the implanted message, which is able to save your souls. So he speaks to being quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And he tells us some things to put aside and to put on humility and receive the implanted message. So I want to point out here, it's very, very cool. James is one of our more earlier writings in the New Testament. And he reflects heavily on the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5 through 7, Jesus' teachings, and Deuteronomy, where the law was re-given by Moses to the Israelites, talking a lot about blessing and curses. And James also heavily reflects on Proverbs chapter 1 through 9, and as well as Exodus 34, 6, and 7. When he says slow to anger, that's an attribute of God. That is God's anger. It's described for us in Exodus chapter 34, verses 6 and 7. And so James is highlighting we should have this type of anger, and we see that type of anger drive Jesus. He very rarely gets angry, but he does a couple of times. And one of those times is in the temple when he drives out the people who had turned his father's house into a place of business and cheating people of money. But to that anger, he grew up going to that temple from the time he was a little boy. So 30 years it took him, and this is one of the last acts that Jesus does in his lifetime. And we see this story in John chapter 2. Now, John isn't chronological, the Gospel of John, so that's why it's in chapter 2, but it actually happens just before he's going to be crucified. It's one of the reasons they crucify him is because he did this. But anyways, so we see good examples of God's slowness of anger all throughout the Bible. We see it in Jesus. James is calling us to have this type of anger, not the human type of anger. It's not quick. It's never to hurt others. Jesus didn't do that to hurt anybody. He didn't just do it because he was angry. He did it because it was an act of judgment. And he was saying, this is not what God desires, change. It was his last call before his death. He was calling Israel to return to God, and they refused the call. But anyways, this was Jesus' moment in the temple, driving them out is very significant, but we don't have time to study that right now. So anyways, he just gives us a good list of ways to live how God wants us to live. What are things that often prevent us from living this way? Is that class bell? Okay. Is that like 5 minutes? Okay. We'll skip that question then. I actually want to move on to the next section of verses because I think there's a really cool point James makes here. So James chapter 1, verses 22 through 25. But be doers of the message and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. Because if anyone is a hearer of the message and not a doer, this one is like someone staring at his own face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and immediately forgets what sort of person he was. But the person who looks into the perfect law of liberty continues to do it, not being a forgetful hearer, but a doer who acts. This one will be blessed in what he does. So what is a mirror for? What do we use a mirror for? Yeah, to look at ourselves, right? And why are we looking at ourselves? What is the purpose of this? Yeah, to make sure we look good. To see where we might have imperfections or things that don't look good and to fix it, right? So if that's what a mirror is for, what do you think the message James is trying to get across by this person who looks at himself and then immediately forgets what he looks like? What's James' point with this metaphor? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you've hit it right on the head. James is saying that people who hear the Word of God is a mirror. It is reality, it's truth. And it is beauty and perfection. And we look into it and we see the standard. Just like the man looks into the mirror and sees himself. And then we see ourselves reflected in that, and we see how we fail to meet that. This man sees his own imperfections within the mirror, and then he turns away and he does nothing to fix it. His hair's a mess, he doesn't comb it. His teeth are yellow and he doesn't brush them. Whatever it is that is the perfect, beautiful standard that the Word of God calls us to, this person looks into it, says, I don't meet it, turns away and forgets immediately to change. James is saying, don't be like that. You're deceiving yourself. You see the perfect standard. You know what you're supposed to do. He's talking to believers here. You know what you're supposed to do. You know what's right. You know what's wrong. You know the standard. Don't turn away and forget it. When you walk out of these doors today, don't stop practicing, because that person deceives themselves and is foolish, as James describes them. We must look into it. We must see the standard, and we must strive to live up for it. And James knows we won't be perfect. God knows that. Jesus knows that. But we are called to a standard, regardless. We're called to strive for it. And when we strive for it, we're blessed. And this blessing is producing good things in our lives from God. Like God will develop us. He will allow us to get closer and closer to that goal. And one day when we die, he will perfect us. We will be at that standard. We're promised that by Scripture. But we must strive for it. We can't just forget it. Yes?
I think we could also look at it as not being self-absorbed and focusing more on ourselves, and instead turning around and
Mhm.
being an outward supporter instead of
Yeah, not to be self-absorbed, a caution against that, yeah. So I think we have a good message from James, good encouragement. Is there any final thoughts before we close today? Anyone else? Anything you've heard from this that you find significant, impactful? Yeah. Discipline is a gift, yeah. It's a good thing to hold on to. I think it's safe to say that we all want to be blessed people. And James here has told us how. It's not a mystery. It's not impossible. And we have heard the words of God today. We know the perfect law. If you need to seek it out, read the book of James. Read Matthew 5 through 7. Read Deuteronomy. Read Proverbs 1 through 9. Read Exodus 34, 6, and 7. See the standards, and you know where you're struggling. We may not, but you know where you are. Do the things that will help you to do that. Cut out what is unhelpful. Whether that's whatever uncomfortable thing it is, whether that's you need to pray about it, you need to find scriptures about it, you need to reach out to a community member to help you through the struggle. Do that. Take the words of James as he's challenged us and do them. Progress in this and strive for the standard. So it's good. Thank you all for your discussion. It was a good class today. So I think that's it.